Hi there, this is Brett Lonsdale, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the final part of the arranging the layout section, and that is we're going to take a look at the importing and exporting of your form design. So first of all, we'll just have a look at the mechanics of how to actually export and import, and then we'll talk about some of the things that you may need to consider when you are importing and exporting the form design. So over the previous few videos, we've been arranging the layout of our form. We've created some sections. We've also added some rich text with the header purchase order form. We've created some side-by-side columns in a separate section, and we've also gone through and created some tabs and rearranged our fields into those tabs. So it may be at this point we want to take an export of the form so that we can import it into the other two forms inside of our list. So remember, we have the new form, the edit form, and the display form. So in order to export it, we can basically hit the drop down here and choose export form. And that's not going to prompt us for any information. It's just going to go through and export the form with the format of the name of the list underscore new form in this case. And it will automatically increment if you've already got some similar file names inside of your downloads folder. So that's exported. It's exported as a JSON file. And what I'm going to do now is just simply uncustomize my form. So once I uncustomize it, you do get the warning to say that you are about to uncustomize your form. So I'll choose yes, and you'll notice that this goes back to the out-of-the-box design from Microsoft SharePoint. So if I just simply cancel that list item, we'll do a Control-Shift refresh, remember. The reason why we're doing that actually is because the standard form was a small side panel as opposed to the large side panel that I'd chosen. But now when I hit new, you'll notice that we are back to the default of a SharePoint list form. So we are now going to go through the steps of importing that design back into our form. So what we're going to do is simply go back into Lightning Forms, and you'll notice again the button has gone back to saying customize, so it's an uncustomized form at this point. So we're going to go through and click customize, and when we're inside the design experience, we can simply go to import form. And on the import form, I can say, yes, I'm sure I want to import the design. Here is the purchase order form JSON file. So we're going to simply open that up, and you'll notice that the design then gets applied. So we're back to having the tabs, we're back to having the rich text and the multi-column layout and so on. So I'm going to hit save and close. And once more, I'm just going to do a Control-Shift refresh so that we get the form size right out of the cache. And when we hit new, we're back to having our customized form again. So notice again, it's got the requester tab as the default, which we set, as well as the other two tabs and so on. Okay, so that's the sort of mechanics of importing and exporting a form. Now, what I just want to talk to you a little bit about is a few things that you need to be aware of when you're using Lightning Forms. One is, if I was to add a new column into my SharePoint list using out-of-the-box SharePoint, so literally if I go through and add a new column here by clicking onto add new column, that column is not going to appear on my form, so just be aware of that. That is something that does need to be added again. And if you've exported your form design for the new form, you will need to import it again on the edit form and the display form as well to include that field, or manually add it to each of the different forms. The other thing to be aware of is, even though you can take the layout, export that from, let's say, the new form and into the edit form and the display form, your logic is likely to be different on each of those three forms. So what I prefer to do is actually go through and create the layout that I want without actually adding any logic, export that design, and then import it into the edit form and the display form, and then build the logic independently for those two of the forms. And I'll just give some examples as to why you might want to do that. Let's take an approve action button. We're going to get into actions shortly, but if we had an approve button, you're not going to want that approve button to be on the new form. You're going to want to have that approve button on the edit form. So that is something that you wouldn't build on the new form and then export that and import it into the other two forms. So the reason for that is when you create a new SharePoint list item, it hasn't yet been saved. That's the last thing that happens to the new form. You save it, and then it perhaps notifies somebody, and once that person is notified, they come into the edit form or the display form and then approve it. They're not going to approve it whilst it's still inside the new form because they've not yet seen it. So there's that kind of scenario. There's also sometimes you will override fields. So let's say, for example, on the purchase order number, what we're going to get into in some expressions a little bit later on is we're going to set a default value on that purchase order number to automatically generate it. So I'm going to put some initial text there that says this purchase order number will be generated once you hit save. Now, if that logic goes into the edit form, you're going to replace the purchase order number once the form loads with the initial value and overwrite the purchase order number that was originally stored in there. So again, that's an example of some different logic that you may want on the new form, but you may not want on the edit form. And of course, when you're in the display form, you're just simply displaying what has already been stored. You're not necessarily going to have any calculations, any validation rules, and all that sort of thing, because it's not being edited. It's not being created either. Okay, so I hope that was useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next series on the styling section. All right, take care. Bye.